The idea of overpopulation has become widespread in modern discourse. You see it mentioned by economists, politicians, comedians, and even everyday acquaintances.
So we start off the video at a strange note as instead of showing like one of those videos where Japanese people are being forced into a train because there's so many of them taking one route, he decides to show a video of what appears to be New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I kid, but let's see what he goes with this.
It's the idea that there are simply way too many people, and since the resources of the Earth are finite, this is supposedly a big problem.
Overpopulation is a relative term to me. Like, let's say you're a person who works at McDonald's and you're making 7.77 an hour and you have 3 kids and you cannot provide for them. That's overpopulation to me. When you do not have enough assets to take care of an already pre-existing population, then that's by itself is overpopulation to me.
You really do see this argument popularized nowadays. The thing is, though, it's all nonsense. There's no such thing as overpopulation.
I think that this is nonsense. Have you seen the prices for a one room flat in Manhattan? I think that it would be a better description of you say over concentration of one population. Like I read a report a long time ago that there was this guy who developed a city in Sudan, and what happened is that since there was no pre-existing city around it, it got over flooded and it became pretty much a slum. So there is something I like to call a overconcentration of a population that uses most of the assets and resources until it's all gone.
Let's have some food for thought. Humanity, collectively, produces enough food to feed over 10 billion people.
Yeah, that's in a good year where there's a lot of crops and rainfall and nobody have overworked the land and there is no mismanagement of food like there was in communist Russia, communist China. Pretty much add communism to any particular country. Communist North Korea, yes, yes. But they keep their stats under the wraps. But yes, there's countries like in Africa where people are pre-existing farmers who live off the land, and when there's a good rainy season, they eat, and when there's not, they need food aid or they'll die. A good example is Cape Town. They was going to be one of the first major cities to run out of water because Cape Town is in a pre-existing desert, pretty much a desertous land. And when there's rainfall, then it's good, but when there's not, it's bad.
In the so-called developed countries, that is to say, those that live off of the exploitation of the third world, the smallest fraction of the population work in agriculture, meaning that even with, in some cases, only 1 to 2% of the population working in agriculture, we manage to produce food in super abundance.
Yes, that's because we have massive cash crops like corn, wheat, barley, etc. that we can grow en masse to feed our stock and also put in our foods. Try to grow something, I don't know, in Sudan. Can you grow massive rice fields in Sudan with an unpredictable rainfall pattern? No, probably not. And also, you do not have a stable government in many of the countries that are very much quote unquote undeveloped. So they're pretty much fucked. And I think that you should stop worrying about the two big W's, as in the Western world, and start worrying about the two little W's, which is weaponized warlords who use the resources of their country to feed their army.
So, where is the problem? Why are hundreds of millions chronically malnourished? Why are billions more going hungry every night?
Because of desertous terrain, unpredictable rainfall, mismanagement of food, overworking of the crops, and so many other things. But let's see where you go.
The problem is, as with many things, capitalism. You see, it isn't a production problem, it's a distribution problem. We produce way more food than we need, but we don't get it to the people that really need it. Capitalism is built on a barbaric rationing system where those that have the money to pay get the products and services they desire, while those that don't can't get even the most basic essentials.
If overpopulation is a capitalist lie, then it is a socialist truth and also Marxist truth, communist truth, whatever alternative economic point of view you want to see it through. The whole rationing system doesn't really exist in, capitalism or capitalist countries because people, because of profit and because of good land, agriculture, management, of thousands of individuals, we can produce food. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me, my man? Can you name one capitalist country that actually had a famine? Like something like, I don't know, Zimbabwe or Venezuela. Like, you don't really give examples, absolutely. And no, a rationalist, like rationing food, when the fuck have that ever happened in like America? And I'm talking about like post World War II America. Like, no.
Under capitalism, milk would sooner go to the cat of a wealthy owner than to a poor malnourished child.
That's because of the choices of the poor and malnourished mother, or lack of choice because in many of these countries they don't have condoms or the pull-out method.
This problem of distribution is made worse with the fact that international capitalist institutions essentially force underdeveloped countries to grow cash crops rather than to develop a self sufficient food system for the country's needs.
Citation needed. I mean, will cite my example. What about Zimbabwe when they did the mass redistribution of land? That was one of the factors that caused massive famine in their country. Did anybody do anything when they took pre-existing European land and gave it to, well, the cronies, not the people? The people are still living in mass huts.
When they can't meet their own needs, they resort to loans or to aid, both of which are systems designed to further entrench these underdeveloped countries into their neocolonial status.
And when they can't consist off loans, they do what President Becky did in the 90s and let millions of people die of AIDS because he did not want his country to go into debt, which was just a sad, utterly disgusting story. But continue on.
The real tragedy, or comedy depending on how you view it, is the supposed solutions provided to this problem. It's even become the punchline of many comedy routines. Cleansing, thinning out the herd, essentially mass murder. It's interesting how outright elimination of entire populations is viewed as a fix.
Citation needed. I really would like to see the comic who makes jokes about mass murdering poor people.
Even jokingly, sooner than systemic and sustainable solutions like decreasing fertility rates and improving agricultural production in the countries most plagued by the overpopulation non-problem.
Well, unless you have a rain machine that will cause fertilization and regular rain to many of these countries, I don't really see it popping off like that. I'm sorry.
Why provide family planning, birth control, and education to young people in the developing world when you can instead slowly kill them off? Why help develop industrial agricultural production so as to help countries become self-sufficient when you can make what Nazi Germany did look like child's play?
Okay, I'm really getting pissed off. Who legitly is calling for pretty much a Hunger Games style hunting of the poor, or just, I don't know, 24-hour watching somebody just starve to death? Like, he has no citations at all. Like, who the fuck is actually doing this?
I want to even mention how wasteful meat production is, for example, in terms of water and grain usage, and I say this as a meat lover myself.
Yeah, I bet you're a meat lover, really with the salami and meatballs. I kid, but he doesn't really give examples. And is it very much wasteful when you get a good tender product?
The entire narrative feeds into the idea of barbaric Asiatic and African hordes siphoning off resources without contributing anything meaningful. Racism always plays a role, and in the case of this question, racist colonial attitudes are in the driver's seat. Something conveniently omitted from this conversation is how the average Westerner uses as much energy as over 100 Bangladeshis.
Yes, and if people had house space like the suburbs of Kansas and they laid it out in, like, I don't know, the city of Manhattan, people would be living in the bottom of the sea. And whose problem is it that, I mean, it should be a good thing that you're living in a house and you use more energy than a person who's living in a mud hut in Bangladeshi or wherever. And have you seen the Bangladeshi death rate when it comes to their infants mortality? It's like 30 to 100,000 compared to America's two, I believe. So yeah, it could be something that has to do with that, I guess.
People scoff at the amount of children a woman has in the third world. It's conveniently never mentioned that an Indian woman with, say, 7 children would have to have 24 more children to match the environmental and resource impact of a single American child.
Yes, and people also scoff at a single mother who works at McDonald's who's making 77 an hour having one child. You know why? Because that's not enough to support a, I don't know, a home, electricity, gas, um, a whole bunch of things, water. So yes, it has to do with pretty much planning out what you can afford. And that's what comes with responsibility. That's why people scoff at it. I mean, there's a hundred general examples I could give.
All this isn't even mentioning how nearly half of all food in the US, for example, is either left to rot or deliberately thrown out. Why isn't this conversation pointed in the correct direction? Why is there no talk about how companies like Nestle, for example, are privatizing water, a natural right of every human being on Earth?
No, they're privatizing fresh water. If you just want generally water, then congratulations, 70% of the world is covered in it. But there's only about 2% of water that is actually fresh water. So the resources, unless you can turn like salt water into fresh water, get some twigs, some rocks, some dirt, wait a couple of days, and then you'll have maybe a pint of it. But still, how is it a natural right to everyone in the world? I mean, come on. Unless we have a global welfare system, no, I'm sorry.
Why is there no talk of how the very top of the population wildly overconsumes in electricity and other fields? Mind you, I'm not saying we should depopulate the first world instead. Not at all. What I'm saying is that a sustainable and prosperous world is possible. We just need a shift in our mindset. The facts really do show that there is no such thing as overpopulation.
Yeah, when you have skyscrapers over huts, and we're not going to de-overpopulate the Western world. We're just going to replace it with, immigrants, migrants, people who have clashing cultures with ourselves. So it's cool.
I get it. When it's a plot point in a movie or video game, it isn't a big deal. Video games aren't supposed to be fact based detailed reports on how to deal with these issues. The thing is, this becomes an issue when this quote unquote problem starts to be taken seriously by certain political projects. It becomes a problem when chunks of the population start believing that a solution really is needed. Climate change will only exacerbate the problems we currently face, and when that happens, video game villain plans start to become real proposals for what some governors will want to do. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for creating. Yeah, I'm out of here, guys. I mean, he doesn't really give examples of which certain politicians or certain countries want mass killings or mass genocides because, mama keep having too many kids. It will just naturally happen when you financially cannot support something that you bring onto this world. I just like to give a shout out to Jesus, and I'm out.